Hi there, I'm Scotty, practicing witch and a professional tarot man. I'm glad you're here. Our vocabulary word for today is suit. Wait, what? What? How did that happen? It's not that kind of suit. What? What's going on? Well, that's better at any rate. As I was saying, our word of the day is suit. Just about everybody knows that card decks, whether typical playing cards or tarot cards, are divided into suits. Simply speaking, a suit is a subdivision within a deck of cards which share a common symbol. Good old-fashioned playing cards are most frequently divided into spades, diamonds, hearts, and clubs. Over the course of the history of playing cards, there have been a wide variety of suit systems which by the 1500s resolved into three distinct styles. But we do tarot here, so what about that? Well, the modern tarot and modern playing cards share some common ancestors, so it shouldn't be a shock that they share some common suits. The deck, which is the great-granddaddy of a majority of modern decks, was the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, first published in 1908. But that deck didn't spring into life fully formed like Athena from the head of Zeus. That deck also had ancestors, most notably the Marseille style developed in France, which in turn had ancestors and cousins in Italy. So the most common suits in the modern tarot follow the Italian-Spanish style and is where we get our friends wands, cups, swords, and pentacles. The pentacle suit was an adaptation of the suit of coins by occultists in the late 19th century, most notably those wacky cats in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Arthur Edward Waite was a member at the time, and when he developed his tarot ideas, he ran with the whole pentacle thing. So for our viewers playing the home game, how many suits are there in a traditional tarot deck? If you said there are 5 suits in a traditional tarot deck, you're right, and you get a star. Give yourself a little treat. Wait, not now. Wait till the video's over. 5 suits in the tarot? Sure. Traditionally, we have our wands, cups, swords, and pentacles, and the major arcana. That's right, the major arcana are a suit. But wait, Scudgy, you might be saying, you said that a suit shares a common symbol, and the major arcana don't share a common symbol. Well, no they don't. Not like the minors. But they do share a theme, the Fool's Journey, and like the minors, they're numbered. It's these two traits, at least to me, that make them a suit all on their own. Each of the suits in the minor arcana typically represent one of the 4 classical elements: earth, fire, water, and air. Looking at it this way, you might add a 5th element, a quintessence, and associate it with the majors. Many folks call this quintessence spirit. This is another reason that we might call the major arcana a suit. I discussed the idea of elements briefly in my video about the 5 of Pentacles. There's a link to that video in the description. Today's card is the 8 of Cups and was suggested by my friend and colleague Stevie. Thanks, Stevie. In the Hermetic Kabbalah, at least as it's interpreted by those cats in the Golden Dawn, the 8s are associated with the Sephirah Had. This Sephirah is located at the base of the Pillar of Severity and is called splendor, majesty, or glory, depending on how you translate it. I don't know about you, but I don't see much glory in this card, or majesty, or splendor. Mostly, I see a person walking away from a nice cup collection. But we need to remember something about the Sephirot on the Tree of Life. None of them operate in a vacuum. They're all part of one story and each plays a part. It might help to know that each of the spheres is associated with a body part. All the parts of the body work together, most of the time at any rate. In the case of the 8th Sephirah, it's associated with the left leg. If you look closely, you'll see that it's our walking friend's left leg that's out in front. By the way, it's Netzach, the 7th Sephirah, that's associated with the right leg. These two Sephirah, like legs, are seen to work together to get things done. Don't be troubled if you're confused by all this. You're in good company. And we're really no closer to understanding why Hod is called splendor. I think the difficulty with a lot of Kabbalah stuff revolves around one simple thing. Translating things isn't straightforward most of the time. And translating spiritual ideas into words is hard, especially when those ideas come from experiences which, due to their very nature, defy verbalization. One thing the words splendor, majesty, and glory all have in common is that they all have something to do with being nifty, of being worthy of praise. So, if we consider the 8s in the context of what comes before and what comes after, the 8s can be seen as an action which is worthy of praise, like deciding to leave a really nice cup collection and move on with life. Now, since I'm not a Kabbalist, I look at the numbers in the tarot in my own weird way. I see the numbers 1 through 10 in the minor arcana as a kind of weird story arc. Once we get to the 8s in our story, we're getting near the end. I see the number 8 as a result of a decision made in 7. And the 8s either express movement or inertia, which bears fruit in the 9s. And which major arcana card is numbered 8? Strength. Sometimes in life, taking action on a decision takes just that, strength. Strength of character, strength of will. In our 8 of Cups, a decision made in the 7 has led our friend to head out and leave behind that cup collection. You may be aware that each of the major arcana have astrological associations. The minor arcana do too. Astrologically speaking, the 8 of Cups is associated with the first decan of Pisces. I'm going to torture you with some math for a little bit. I'm sure you know that there are 12 signs in the zodiac, at least how Western astrology generally handles things. And that the signs kind of move around in a big circle in the sky. Okay, they don't really move, we're moving, but astrology works from our perspective here on Earth and how we see the sky. So that big yearly circle divided by 12 signs equals 30 degrees per sign. You know, because a circle has 360 degrees. And for reasons I don't quite grok, astrologers decided to divide the 30 degrees of each sign into 10-degree pieces. Those 10-degree pieces are what we call decans, and each decan in each sign has a planet associated with it. The 8 of Cups, being the first decan of Pisces, is associated with Saturn. A note here. In classical astrology, they didn't work with the outer planets, mostly because they couldn't see them. They didn't have telescopes back then, you see. Anyway, let's see what sense I might be able to make of all this mess. Cups is a water thing. So is Pisces, which is a mutable, meaning flexible water sign. Saturn, on the other hand, isn't a very flexible influence and has a sort of endy kind of energy. So throw all these together and we get a kind of sad ending in the realm of our feelings. I imagine I'd be sad and emotional too if I had to leave my nice cup collection behind. The traditional association of the cups is with the classical element of water. I see water as our emotional world, the world of feeling, intuition, and spirituality. Martial artist, author, actor, and philosopher Bruce Lee said a thing that I absolutely love. Be water, my friend. Empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless like water. You put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend. In our day-to-day lives, we might consider water to be soft. We slide into a bath. We enjoy the sound of a cleansing rain. Soft, relaxy kinds of things. Ever performed a glorious belly flop at the pool? Water didn't seem so soft then, did it? Ever seen a video of a tidal wave coming ashore? That water seemed anything but relaxing, right? The elements as they appear in the tarot and elsewhere in esoteric practices don't necessarily represent the physical things they're named after. The water of the suit of cups isn't necessarily referring to actual water, the kind you drink or belly flop into. The elements are concepts related to neutral energies. When we're noting the elemental influences in a reading, we have to consider not only the helpful side of the elements, but how that energy might have unhelpful correspondences as well. As Bruce Lee said, now water can flow or it can crash. Hopefully, we've all had the chance to experience the upside of emotions like joy, love, happiness. And hopefully we've experienced that more than the downside of emotions like sadness or loss. But we humans experience a lot of emotion-y things in our lives, bless our hearts. In the Eight of Cups, we see one of the downsides, resignation and realization. Sometimes things just don't work out and we have to move on, bless our hearts. Here, we have the Eight of Cups from the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, which we met earlier. One of the first things that jumps out at me when looking at this card is the red cloak the figure is wearing. What's up with that red cloak? I don't know about you, but watery things don't strike me as particularly red as a general rule. What might the symbolism be here? One way of looking at this might be that blood is red, and blood is a liquid. Once upon a time, there was a philosophy of medicine which looked at the balance or imbalance of four fluids in the body called humors. It may sound funny these days, but the system was the foundation of medicine in Europe for a long time. And one of those humors was considered to be the blood, and is where the word sanguine comes from. Sanguine means both happy and, bloody. So maybe the red cloak is related to the emotions of the blood, enthusiastic and determined. We might be able to make that work. Also, red is frequently associated with strength and courage, which also fits with that whole blood thing. But I had an interesting thought about that red cloak. You see, when this deck was first printed in 1908, printing was a bit different than it is now. And I wondered what color the cloak was on the original card when it was first printed. There's an interesting website, waitesmith.org, which is a museum of the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, and they have some great images of an original deck. In that deck, the Eight of Cups doesn't have a bright red cloak, but a sort of orangey colored one instead. Now, it's possible that the cloak was originally red in that card and has faded over time. But knowing that the Kabbalah was such an influence on Waite, I did some digging. The Eight of Cups, I said earlier, is associated with Hod, but more precisely with Hod and Bria, which is associated with a color which could be described as a tawny orange. And considering that orange is associated with many concepts like road opening or the removal of obstacles, then we might see how the ideas of this card might be associated with an orange color. I took you through all that because I'm that kind of nerd. But not only that. Also to demonstrate ways of exploring the cards from multiple perspectives, and in doing so, gain a more nuanced take on them. Another thing that can be helpful is to look at other cards in the deck to see if there are commonalities. For example, take a look at the Tower here. That poor dude has a red cloak. And this poor unfortunate fellow in the Ten of Swords has a red cloak as well. I'm reminded of the poor red shirts in Star Trek. It's why you're not likely to see me in a red shirt. They just don't tend to have the best of luck. Our red or orange cloaked friend is walking away from their cup collection. When figures in a card have their back to us, it can indicate that it is us that is leaving, or it might indicate that someone else is moving away. This all depends on the context in which it occurs in the reading. And the walking stick can be seen here as a representation of personal power, which is really what it takes to set out into unfamiliar realms. And what about those cups there? Are they empty? Full? This too is something which might vary depending on the reading, but I would in general answer that the cups are empty. Like when something we once cherished is no longer fulfilling. And up here in the sky, we have a solar eclipse going on. The sun can symbolize conscious awareness, things that are easy to see. The moon, conversely, can symbolize our unconscious mind. And here with the solar eclipse, where the moon blocks out the sun, we can see this as our unconscious mind coming to the surface. Things that had previously been below the surface, not thought of or considered, are coming to the forefront. It's interesting to me to note that the way the eclipse is illustrated indicates that this is the beginning of the process. And we have a river here which seems to be flowing towards us from the mountains in the distance. Looking at it that way, our friend can be considered to be following the river upstream to its source. A.E. Waite, in the Pictorial Key to the Tarot, written to accompany the deck, describes the card this way. A man of dejected aspect is deserting the cups of his felicity, enterprise, undertaking, or previous concern. In practice, it is usually found that the card shows the decline of the matter, or that a matter which has been thought to be important is really of slight consequence. Here, in the Robin Wood card, we also have a red-cloaked friend walking away with a fancy walking stick. The author and artist tells us that the red of the cloak symbolizes the courage, and that they carry the walking stick to help him on his way, to give him sure feet and a steady path. He can use it to test the road ahead, or to meet challenges. On it are bound an eagle feather for bravery, white horsehair to speed him in his search, and green willow in mourning for what is past and gone. We have a moon in the sky and not an eclipse like in the previous card. The author writes that the moon is both full and waning, to show that the completion of this phase is upon the seeker. And flying in front of the moon are 8 birds, geese in migration, suggesting a sense of instinctive movement and change. And the river is between the traveler and the cups. Our friend has made it beyond the waters of emotion to begin a new journey into the unknown myth lying heavily in the mountains before them. The cups left behind are stacked, and we can see this as showing that all the bits and pieces of the situation have been dealt with, or at the very least considered. These cups show stones of various colors, which can indicate different aspects of life, hinting at a complete change in path. And once again, we can't tell right away if these cups are full or empty. This card is from the Mucha Tarot, based on the artwork of Alphonse Mucha. We see a different perspective in this card, literally. Our traveling friend is not walking away, as we've seen before, but is walking towards us. To me, this gives the card less a feeling of leaving things behind and more one of moving forward. We still have the cups which are behind her, but they aren't stacked up. We can see these as being along her path. She has worked through any issues along the way and is beyond the influence of the unconscious, the waters behind her. Her cloak is blue, which to me implies a more intuitive and emotional approach. She's cloaked in the strength which she derives from her emotions. The eclipse is beginning, but she has left that behind as well. The Urban Tarot by Robin Scott is a lovely deck based not on the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, but on the Thoth deck of Aleister, Crowley, and Frieda. I actually prefer this deck to the original. I can more easily make sense of the imagery in Scott's work than what we find in the Thoth deck. Crowley named the minor arcana, and Scott kept those names in this deck. Here the Eight of Cups is called Indolence. Its original meaning from Latin meant without pain, but these days, indolence means laziness, the avoidance of work. In the guidebook, Scott writes, "There is a siren call which we have all heard at one time or another that tells you to give up, stay home, phone it in, and just stop giving a crap. Goodness knows I've answered that call more than I'd like to admit." I had been imagining this card originally as being set in some anonymous cubicle farm where a lazy employee was drinking on the job and playing solitaire rather than working. But I decided to get a little more personal with it and depict my own workstation and put my own self-recriminations for laziness right up on the screen. One big blank rectangle open in Photoshop. The empty canvas is a scary thing for any artist to contemplate. This card does a good job of illustrating Scott's intention. And I think it's interesting that we don't see the indolent artist in the card. He's probably off procrastinating somewhere. The cups here are stacked up like we've seen in other cards, but they've been stacked as an idle time-killing activity. And one of them has a little something left in it. I can only assume it's bourbon, since in the background we can see what looks strikingly like a bottle of Jack Daniels. Now check out this little guy here. I've made creatures out of office supplies in my office too when I'm bored, distracted, or procrastinating. And here, next to the monitor, we can see both the Rider-Waite Smith and Thoth 8 of Cups cards, waiting to provide inspiration to the artist. And in the background shadows, hanging on the wall, is a picture of Saturn, which ties the astrological association of the card to the subject. Saturn has some heavy energy and can certainly contribute to a lack of motivation for work. In this conception of the card, we don't see the taking action and leaving things behind side of things. Instead, we see the opposite of that. Here we see avoidance. I can almost see this card as an intermediary step between the Rider-Waite Smith 7 and 8 of Cups. Like, oh my, there's so much to do. I don't want to do it. Look at my cool office supply creature. Well, I guess it's time to get to work. Even though I don't work with the Thoth deck system generally, this card does provide some insight into the Rider-Waite Smith system, 8 of Cups. The 8 of Cups takes a look at one of the hardest and saddest moments we can experience. The moment when we realize that it's time to move on from something that we once held dear. Maybe we've felt that for a while, but have been ignoring those feelings, distracting ourselves. But now that realization has come to the surface, and now we can't ignore those feelings any longer. So we screw up our courage, make the hard decision to move on, leaving behind our once glittering feelings which have now grown empty. But once we take that first step, we're on our way to a source of new feelings, which can refill our cup. This card was suggested by Stevie. Thanks again, Stevie. And thank you for spending some time with me today. If you've enjoyed that time, please like, subscribe, share, comment. I'm Skaji. Safe journey. This is another reason we might call the Major Arcana. It's the suit in between the minors and the majors, the major. The Urban Tarot by Robin Squat.